So it happened last summer, a few months after I had broken up with my college girlfriend, Tina. We had been in relation for, I guess, 3 years or so. Not that I really didn't care anymore, it's just that I really had a hard time getting over her, though. During our time, we got to learn that we weren't the ideal types for one another, like I am an introvert. Most of the time don't feel like sharing anything. But Tina happened to be my polar opposite. She had this principle which she devised herself, which she used to call the principle of transparency, which to her implied that couple are in a need of sharing everything with one another for the sake of keeping a relationship. And by everything, she actually meant everything, from what I ate, to what time I took a bath, and even at what time my dad arrived home, and in return she would literally share everything with me, including her childhood crush, and the first time she got to sleep with someone, even calling me on my way back home to discuss what brand of women's underwear I prefer the most. Well, having exams next week, I wasn't really in the mood of talking about bras and underwear, as the sophomore years looked to be menacing as the days went by. But we had our good times as well, like she was always sincere and devoted towards me like all the time, and she was indeed a charming girl a guy could get to know. So why we decided to break up? Well, just as she was sincere, her jealousy came as an extra package. I mean, she used to be literally jealous of any girl who would approach me, which even included 5-year-olds. Anyone could actually interpret this from her spiteful stares, and you could even hear the gritting of her teeth. I had the worst during group works where we had to obviously work with the opposite gender, but Tina wasn't the type to understand that. She literally wanted the name and phone number of the girls I ever worked with, and would call them in the middle of the night, warning them that I was only hers. By the way, I am doing my bachelor in psychology at a local college in Missouri. My female groupmates actually found my girlfriend's behavior funny and amusing, except the time when I was discussing the upcoming term paper with Rebecca regarding sleeping disorders. Tina strode into our conversation and literally pulled Rebecca's hair. I then realized that it was truly getting out of hand. Tina explained that she was only analyzing whether Rebecca's hair had a better cut than hers, and whether I would be drawn towards it. I was indeed upset with her, and Rebecca didn't look happy as well. That day I still remember it. I held Tina's shoulder and coldly told her, "Tina, look, it really isn't working between us." Tina was literally shaken. A drop of tear sprinted out from her left eye while it melted down along her cheeks. She looked at me in utter bewilderment for a few seconds, and then shifted her gaze to Rebecca and said such with a dry smile, "Oh, I now see, you truly love her haircut. Perhaps you two even made love, yeah? So this is how it ends for us?" "Hey, wait, now you are making things up. It's not like that. We are only group mates." I tried to hold Tina's arms, but she shoved away. I called her name, but her only reply was her cold shoulders with her bitter steps stalling away from us. I apologized to Rebecca, but she was too disturbed with the whole thing to give me a straight reply. She only muttered out, "Your girlfriend is such an asshole." Well, she's no longer my girlfriend, that's for sure. That evening when I arrived home from college, I tried calling Tina. Her phone was off. I thought she needed some time alone, so I let her be like that. But days went by. Her number remained dead as usual. She even dropped out of college, and when I went to visit her home, I found out that she moved away. Geez, I really couldn't make out the extent of her credulity. The least she could have done was to inform me that she was moving away and get her number revived once more. I obviously was not the only one who wanted to contact her. What about her parents? That reminds me, Tina barely made contact with her parents after she moved out on her own the time she turned 18. I really didn't know how I was feeling about this breakup. Confused, heartbroken, delighted, or disappointed. But one thing was sure, I really missed her company as my lonely days oozed along. I know a bit of hacking. No, I should be saying that I am pretty good at it. In fact, there was a time when I used to visit the deep web quite often, and by piggyback hacking I used to explore its depths. Obviously, I was not into those sick stuffs, but the deep web can also be regarded as a hub filled with useful resources, which you won't normally find in the surface, and it also helped me in my studies in a lot of ways. But be warned, it's not a place for babies. If you allow your naivety to function there, you may unconsciously even invite your doom upon yourself. But usually I tried my best to remain on the safe side. Except one time, that one time was well enough to ostracize myself from the deep web for an eternity. My breakup with Tina was jamming me with poisonous pills of loneliness. At times I even enjoyed watching sadistic videos of people killing each other in the deep web. I knew I needed to find someone, unless I wished myself to end up like those crones. It was at that time I came across a forum whose slogan was, "Find your ideal match." Strangely enough, recently I started getting spam mails asking me to join this forum in the deep web. Pretty peculiar, as spam mails never mentions the deep web, though I never got influenced to visit this forum until now. There are loads of sites in the surface web where you can chat with various girls to find your ideal match, and even those where you can have your hot talks with hookers. Though I never ventured into those, they always seemed so fake and predictable to me. However, something about this forum drew me towards it. I really don't know to this day. Perhaps it was my loneliness, but I honestly regret it to this very day. Anyways, the platform of this forum really impressed me. It at first wanted to know my name and age, and then went into asking me series of relevant personality tests. As a psychology major, it did not take me time to guess that the system was evaluating my personality type through the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator test. My result soon came as me being INTJ, introvert, intuitive, testing, and judging type. I was already known to my psychology type, so I wasn't really surprised. Then the system went into a filtering process, and after some time it recommended that a girl named with the name sassy_gone_hot191998 is my ideal type. I felt a bit odd, like how can a personality test just recommend me one girl? Especially how can a system be so precise into recommending me my ideal type? It was indeed odd, but seeing the girl's picture, I was surely impressed. She had dark flaxen hair with dark eyes, lovely lips with sharp nose and cheek lines, the complete opposite of Tina's roundish face with blonde curls. What the hell? Why am I even comparing that creep with this beauty? I found she was online. She knocked me straight away. "Hey handsome, how's it going?" I was taken by surprise with such an abrupt inbox. I didn't even have a profile pic, so it was startling to see this random girl calling me handsome. I just replied, "Hey." "Hey, looks like I gotta be your ideal match. Don't worry, we will have loads of fun, I promise." Now I grew a bit nervous, suspecting whether she was a hooker or something. I replied, "Okay." She typed, "You doing well?" "Yeah, sort of." "You don't sound well. Did you experience a breakup recently?" This really surprised me, no doubt. This girl was quite sharp. I typed, "Yeah, but how could you guess?" "Well, this is a place lonely people end up in, goes true for the heartbrokens, perverts, and even widowers. So it wasn't hard to guess." I was impressed with her logic, but the thing I typed, I truly regretted it right after I pressed enter. "Are you feeling lonely as well?" "Hold there, cowboy, we don't do stuff so hastily here." Damn, that was indeed a dumb thing to say in the first place. I wrote, if you don't mind sharing, have you also experienced a breakup?" She did not seem to pay a heed to my text as she wrote next, "So how was your ex-GF?" I was going to type very frustrating, but Regina burst into my room. "Dinner's ready, squirt. Come down, say, what the hell are you even doing? Can't you knock before you enter my room, please?" "Whatever, watcha doing?" "Chatting. With a prostitute, hey?" "What the hell, why would I even do that?" "Because you are blushing and it looks quite obvious." "Can you please get out of my room?" "Not until you get downstairs for dinner." "Okay, I get it, I am coming down, sheesh." Regina's my elder sister, but what makes her menacing is that she is working in the police as a detective. She is like 26, married to her senior colleague police officer. Jason and I did not even get to the worst part. She bugs me like anything, meaning she is overly attached to me, obviously not in an intimate way, but it means to indicate her overprotective nature in her sisterhood. She sniffs into all aspect of my life, always suspecting me and what she says being engaged in foul play. She no longer lives with us, but pays us regular visit, as she always have to fulfill this need of rummaging through the life of her brother. Oh, there is something even worse than the worst. My sister even installed a bug in my phone which gives out a signal every time my phone turns off. Now to her it is a form of protection, in the sense if I get kidnapped one day somehow, and if the bad guys get to turn off my phone, my sister could then track them. When I found this out, I was like, what the hell? Why would someone even kidnap a 19-year-old? I asked her. These days even grandmas get kidnapped, stupid. What the hell? Stop treating me like a 5-year-old. I looked at Jason. He said, "Your sister's right, Squirt. The days are tough, man. We need to get all forms of protection as much as possible." "But why the tracking? Isn't that a breach of private right?" Jason bent a bit towards me to adjust his large 6'5" with my average. "Look, we aren't actually tracking you in rough sense. It is just a protective measure. I even installed it in my parents' phones as well. Listen, Squirt, your sister and I, we work in the police, and there's no telling what may happen to you folks. I don't like getting into the details, but undoubtedly the days have grown tough now. Criminals always target the families of those who dedicate their lives towards fighting for justice. You do understand how much your sister loves you, so please do respect our initiative." So yeah, I finally gave in and got my phone bugged. But the thing was that whenever my phone died out, my sister would always call home in order to ask my whereabouts. But it wasn't all that bad in the end, as I didn't feel bugged at all. But there are good parts to Regina as well. Being a detective, she would sometimes discuss cases with me, asking me about the psychological disorder infesting the offenders. Usually the ones committing murders suffers either from antisocial personality disorder or being victimized with intermittent explosive disorder, and the rapists being driven with either erotomania if the victim is known, or sexual addiction if the victim someone is random. You know, Squirt, one day you may even end up being in the crime intelligence division if you keep this up. My sister would praise me. Thanks, but I really don't feel like being a cop, especially if it's with you. I smirked. She would next hit me with the closest object she could find, and we would laugh in the end. Our dinner would have been a silent if Regina and Jason wouldn't have discussed their next holiday destination. The locations ranged from California, Texas to Chicago, and then ended up being in Italy, but the discussion did not look like it wouldn't ever cease. Then I just burst out. "Why just choose a place already, the Grand Canyon or even Hawaii?" My sister nodded. "Hey, the Grand Canyon sounds smooth, what do you think?" Jason replied. "That sounds great." He pointed towards me. "You know, Squirt, we should hire you as our trip advisor for our next vacation." "Yeah, a $100 for each advice," I smirked. "No, my friend, you deserve at most a nickel." Hearing this, my sister and parents burst into laughter. I couldn't help but smirk a bit in order to accept my defeat. Some of you may think that even after being 19, why I still haven't moved out from my parents' house. Well, the thing is that I still don't feel like having a job right now. I am doing good at college, and my parents are cool about bearing my expenses because they feel I got a good future, so, hey, why move out if your parents still agree to pay all your bills, hey? After finishing dinner, I just couldn't resist my temptations and jolted to my room. Not to my surprise, I found a new inbox from my ideal match. "Hey, are you still there? Why don't you reply?" "Sorry, I was having dinner with my family downstairs. My sister demanded me to go downstairs, so I left without replying." "Oh, how cute. So is your sister hot?" I was a bit taken back by this question. Here I was sitting and talking to a complete stranger, but it felt like we knew each for a long time. I guess that is how hookers are trained to sound. Familiar. But in my mind, I was wishing that she wasn't some sort of an online hooker, like the ones who are infamous in being exhibitionists, who would initially lure you with their lustfulness, entice you, enchant you to fetch away your personal information, and when the time seeps in, would eventually drain away your credit card balance as you get to know them too better, or like the way I would term it as non-recognizable. Anyways, I already felt like I was being drawn by her. Perhaps it was due to my months long of lonesomeness. Something inside me wanted to this conversation to stay alive. So I replied, "Yeah, sort of. She was quite popular among guys back in college." Then suddenly her webcam was turned on, and to add to further dose to my nervousness, her face appeared in front me. So, does she look hotter than me? All these happened in such a rush that I completely lost myself for a while, or even more, because the next thing I did was indeed utterly dumb. According to the safety standards of the deep web, you are to maintain your privacy as much as possible. You must maintain anonymity at all times, and you mustn't turn on the webcam at all cost. Some even advise you to cover up your webcam with tape in case your PC gets hacked. There are times where the hacker takes full control of your PC from your end. That person could even turn on your webcam and get a snapshot your face and use it to kidnap you and then ask ransom from your parents. Phew, I know that's a lot of stuffs, but the deep web isn't a place for babies, of course. To my utter stupidity, as I turned on the video chat from my end, I began to marvel at the beauty of my new ideal match. She was Raven, perhaps 18 or may even be 20 years old, similar to my age. But there was something about her which drew me right from the start. Maybe it was her eyes. It looked familiar, perhaps like Tina's. What the hell? Why was I even bringing my ex into this? Tina had blonde natural curls with a round face, but this girl, she looked like an absolute stunner, an epitome of raven beauty with a sharp nose and a sleek cheek line. I was absolutely taken. Plus, I no longer regretted for not having tape on my webcam. Hey there, gosh, you really are a cutie. It took me some time to adjust to my new situation because I didn't want to appear like a complete loony or a pervert in our first video chat. Oh hey, what's up? After those words just literally staggered out, I knew it for sure that I sounded like a complete idiot. Pull yourself together, Johnny. But to my surprise, she just gave a sweet smile, ignoring my lameness, and replied, "Oh, I'm new to this neighborhood, so I am just adjusting." Really? Where are you from then? From Missouri. Hey, I am from Missouri as well. Ouch, I made a damn mistake back there. You aren't supposed to disclose your location in the deep web. Oh, cool. So when can we meet? Huh? We just met and she already wanted to meet up with me or possibly wanted to hook up. Since I wasn't replying, she wrote instead, "How does Saturday night sound? Meet you at the Davies at 7 sharp. I felt desperate and clueless, so I replied, "Sure, I will be there. Wait, I never got to know your name?" Silly me. P, my name is Jeanette, but you can call me Know Me Jane because it rhymes with pain. Ha 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 ha. At this point, I really felt extremely awkward. There was something about this girl which made me uncomfortable right from the start. Oh, cool, I am John, but you can call me Johnny, and I don't know what it rhythms with, LOL. Ha 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 ha. Okay, see you on Saturday, and I will rhyme it up for you. It was 6:50 and I arrived at the Davies, and while I was looking up at the menu, I noticed the same girl I met on the deep web that day stroll in. Surprisingly, she did not have to scour around the entire restaurant to search me. It seemed she knew where I was instantly. More appropriately, she remembered my face. She was well adorned in a dark dress matching it up with her dark hair, but the most appealing factor was her purple lipstick and her sleek figure. I was so deeply mesmerized that I forgot to return her hand wave as she approached me. I just kept intently gazing at her as she approached me. "Hey, you are Johnny, right?" Yeah, and you're Jeanette, right?" She smiled shyly and said, "Please call me Jane. I told you the reason if you can recall." I replied, feeling embarrassed. Yeah, because it rhymes with pain." I noticed her face turn dark a bit as she pressed her lips and said, "Right." I didn't want to ask her straight away regarding the pain and suffering she had gone through, or the pain she was in right now, because I didn't want to ruin the moment. "So where were you before you moved in?" I asked, trying to break up the tension between us. At some place, of course, it's better we don't talk about that. I instantly felt stupid after receiving her reply. I didn't want to sound too boorish at our first meet, but it seemed like that I was already making her feel uncomfortable right from the start. "Okay, Johnny, let's not get into personal details at the moment." Out of suddenness, she asked, "So what made you enter that website?" Well, you see, I was feeling lonely, that's all." "Why did you break up with that ex of yours?" I just gave her a slight nod as a reply, not knowing how to answer that. "So how was your ex as a person?" Usually, girls don't like to ask about the guy's exes, especially when you are at your first date. I then remembered that she also asked about Regina, my elder sister, that day. That made me think, perhaps she is just evaluating the various girls who have been around in my life. From my psychological knowledge, I can interpret her in being of a vigilant and protective type. I wish not to speak about her. She was a terrible person. She used to bug me a lot. I really don't know what made me surge up like that back then. Perhaps all the ill thoughts I had of Tina simply just gushed out. Her reaction was normal. She just lowered her gaze and looked surprised and gave a series of nods, saying, Okay. Almost abruptly, her mood changed as she brought up her face with a cheerful smile, saying, "Let's all forget our past and just move on together, okay? Damn, this girl is truly my ideal match," I squealed internally in silence. For the next 1.5 hours, we chatted merrily. and to my contentment I discovered both of us shared a lot of similar interests. Jane loved football, tennis, and loved playing video games in her PS4. Her favorite game was Last of Us. Just like me, she claimed herself in being dexterous in hacking, or perhaps even better, as she claimed that she has ventured far deep. The dark corners of the deep web, which most ordinary hacker wouldn't possess the skill to even crawl in there. I was intently hooked by this gorgeous woman. After dinner, we exchanged numbers, and just as we parted ways, she edged towards me and daintily placed a kiss on my cheeks. It felt like a thunder shock, as my cheeks immediately felt like hot burning charcoal. She winked at me and said, "That is your goodbye gift, just to let you know I had a terrific evening with my new ideal match. See you next Saturday, and don't worry, I will make the call." I felt like as if the sweetness of the heavens had finally descended upon me. Days went by sluggishly, and I tried calling Jane but found I couldn't reach her. I tried to pacify myself by saying, "She is a hacker, John, so it is quite common for her to keep her number off." But each day felt like months, and as each hour passed by, my heart sank deeper into the abyss of restlessness. I tried inboxing her at the website I met her but found she wasn't online. Where is she? Then on Thursday night, I got a call from Stephen, one of my classmates and also my group mate. "Hey, John, do you know where Rebecca is?" "What do you mean where Rebecca is?" It's like she hasn't come home yet and her parents are asking over to see whether she is staying over at anyone's place." "Wait, she normally does not like to sleep over even if it is at a girl's place, and she is not someone to run away as well." "I know, man. That is the thing I told her parents. Even they agreed. We tried calling her hundreds of times now, but her phone is dead." I looked at the wall clock and found that it was past 10 p.m. She won't be staying away for this long without calling. Her parents called the cops and they are checking around. "Okay, inform me as soon as you get an update." "Okay, man, I will." I also tried calling Rebecca a few times only to find that it was of no use, as most likely a dozen other people must be trying to reach her at that moment. The night went by without Stephen calling me, implying there was no update on Rebecca's whereabouts. I visualized her running away from home. Perhaps she needed some personal space. Perhaps she wanted to move out from her parents' place but was too embarrassed to tell them that. Whatever was the case, I just prayed for her to be okay. Stephen called around 7 in the morning. "Hey man, come over at Rebecca's place. Oh man, it's a complete mess. Quick." What happened?" "Rebecca's been murdered." "I will spare you the details for now. You just get here." I lost no time. I hopped on my bicycle and dashed across the neighborhood. "Rebecca? Murdered? How?" When I reached her place, I found that the front yard of her place was strewn with cops. I got a glance at Stephen just nudging outside her place and went over to him. "Hey, just what the fuck happened?" "I don't know, man," he wailed. "I wish we knew, but in the morning they just found her body at the old abandoned warehouse, completely naked." He yanked at my collar. "Her head has been completely thrashed. You hear me? Completely thrashed. With a chainsaw, there is nothing of her left to make you recognize her." I tried to get in and have a look at her, but the cops stopped me from entering even the front yard. I noticed Rebecca's mom crying frantically while her father held her tightly, and her younger brother wailing beside them. Whoever or whatever did this wasn't a human. He was a monster. On Saturday afternoon, Jane called. "Hey, how have you been? Can we meet up tonight?" "Oh, that sounds swell." "Is something wrong? You don't sound right." "No, it's just that I am just feeling a bit down." "Why, did someone you used to love just die, huh?" Her words rung up my eardrums. How does she know? Though I was not in a relationship with Rebecca, but from her words it felt as if she sounded spiteful. No, it's not like that. Someone I used to know passed away yesterday. She used to be my classmate and also my group mate." "Oh my, how did she die?" "She got killed by some crazy psycho." "You used to love her?" "No, it's not like that. She was just a friend." "Johnny, I can perfectly understand how you feel, so why don't you just come over at my place and we just mingle around?" Shoot, is she inviting me to have sex with her? Jane's apartment looked old and dreary from the outside. Most likely she rents the place herself, and hackers usually loves cloudy places like this. Still, a sense of uncertainty tingled my spine as I made my way towards the stairs. Jane opened the door right after my first knock. Hey, look who's here. Come in. She allowed me to enter her apartment. As I stepped in, I could smell whiskey and a mixture of other drugs and alcohol looming in the air. Damn, I am at the wrong place. I should be getting home right now. Jane snapped. Hey, you just got in. At least spend the night with me. We are holding a special live streaming event on the deep web, and you will be our star guest for tonight. I don't understand. What do you mean by that live streaming event? Oh, you will soon understand it. You will get to understand everything. I promise you, boyfriend. As tonight, you won't be going home for dinner. Before I could properly collect what she had just said, she got hold of a whiskey bottle lying on the side drawer beside us and lunged it across my head. The last thing I remember was seeing the sleek legs of Jane as she whispered huskily, I hope I haven't hurt you too much, as we got a long night ahead of us. And then everything went black. Today is a special night, people, cause today I finally get to have my revenge on my cheating ex. Thank you all for your presence, as tonight you won't be disappointed. The voice sounded familiar. As I drew open my eyelids, the first thing I noticed was the silhouette of feminine figure against the computer screen. I began to look around and found out that I was sitting in a tiny room with a computer, bed, and their hostile possessor. I noticed some metallic tools on top of the bed. I tried to get up and found that I was completely strapped in with tapes and ropes. I gulped and murmured to myself, this can't be really happening. Then the girl looked away from the computer screen and glanced at me. Look, who is awake? I hope you are all right, because we are going to have a busy night tonight. I swear, her voice sounded a lot different from the time we dated. Jane had a deep voice, if I could recall from our first meeting, but she sounded completely different, and like someone I knew very well. She edged towards me and bent downwards to my eye level. Only then I noticed that she was completely naked. I twitched. She gently brushed my hair with her right hand, and it was then I felt a surge of pain on my head. My head still hurt like crazy, and her handling wasn't making me feel any good. She looked at me intently with her hypnotizing eyes. Her face gave out a glow of sadism, indicating something dark and insidious just lay ahead. Where am I? I managed to blurt out. My throat felt dry and heavy. You will soon find out everything. Don't worry, stupid. The way she uttered stupid sounded familiar, but head felt too heavy for me to think properly. She hit my head out of spite, even though it was just a glancing hit, but the prior pain made the hit truly excruciating. I gasped for my breath. I began to feel sweat trickling down my forehead as Jane pushed my chin to bring my head visible to the screen. See guys, here's my ex. Doesn't he look cute? I looked at the tiny computer screen, unable to fathom who were there to watch me in live stream. Then something just struck me. Did she just mention me as her ex? As I tried to figure it out, she yanked a second hit on my head, which felt 1,000 times painful than the last one. She whispered, "You fucking asshole." I felt nauseated, and it seemed like I was going to throw up any moment. Why did she refer me as her ex? She addressed to her audience and said, "So suggest me your ways, guys. How should I put an end to this? We all know that this asshole deserves the worst among all. Am I not right?" That time, most likely, the screen was pounding with suggestions as Jane began to read them out loud. Let's see. Death by strangling. Nope, too ordinary. Death by poisoning. The fuck? Are we still in Shakespearean age? Burn out his body. Oh no, he is too cute for that. Chainsaw him like the way you did to that bitch who stole him from you. This last suggestion made me peer at Jane with wide eyes. Rebecca. She killed Rebecca. Tina? Oops. Looks like he knows it all now, chuckled Jane. No, I should be calling her Tina. Then she bent down and eyed at me. Look at what you have done to me. I am no longer me anymore. I am now just a fucking slut and a murderer thanks to you. I once more gasped for my breath because all these were too much for my taking. I stared out in utter disbelief. I don't understand, Tina. What made you become like this? Tina's fucking dead, you moron. I am Jane, born out of pain. She blasted out, gritting her teeth. You killed her the day you dumped her for that dark-haired snatcher. I remained silent as words found it difficult to pour out from my mouth. She continued. I always suspected that you were losing interest over my blonde curls and round face, And the time I saw that bitch with you, I realized you were edging towards sleeker-looking woman with dark hair, and I wanted to prove myself right. That is why I decided to transform into this slut, hoping that you would fall for me. A part of me secretly wished that you would sincerely state how much you missed your old girl Tina. If you would have done that, I would have spared that snatcher, and also would have surely returned to my old self. I honestly wanted to give you a second chance. A chance to throw myself at your arms, but oh no, you just had to fall for a sleeker woman and make me sound terrible to her. What about that ideal match website? To my surprise, Tina burst out into chuckles and giggles. She looked euphoric for a few seconds, and then her voice turned deep like that of Jane. Oh, that. Johnny, you really think you're smart? You are fucking predictable like all men. In case you didn't know, I already knew you were at the deep web because I recognized your username, BUM_Tyler. That's your pen name and also your anonymous name, so once you entered the deep web, I was able to track you down. To be more specific, I have always tracked you, John Turner. She edged even closer to me. I could now feel the heat of her rasped breaths. Thanks to our principle of transparency, I got to learn all about you, but there is something you missed asking about me, my past. I grew up being severely bullied in kindergarten. You know what my crime was? I was born a prodigy, excelling in my studies all the time, which was my biggest crime. My parents could not do much, they just simply complained, but the teachers never paid any attention to my woes. Middle school wasn't any better. The girls used to dump trash into my locker. They were dark-haired, always mocking my natural blonde curls. And your bitch was one among them, and the guys used to attempt into pulling up my skirt. I was in a desperate state. There were times I even wanted to end my life to drain away all this pain forever. But then I came across this thing called hacking, which changed my life forever. Initially, I had trouble with all the coding, but knowing myself as a natural genius, I was able to learn all the tricks, and then I began my experiments. I regularly used to hack into the school's central database and change the grades of my bullies. You should have seen their faces when they used to get their grades, but the best part was that they were already dumb students getting dumb grades. I only made them look even dumber. My school had a hard fixing up the entire system once it got discovered. By the time I became a teenager, I was able to hack into emails and even send emails under my offenders' names and cause misunderstanding between them and their boyfriends. By the time I entered high school, I was already in the deep web, scouring over all the crazy places. Tina eyed at me hypnotically. Want to know how well my skills are now? I can now get to that Mariana's Trench and come back to the surface without drowning. The day you proposed to me, I promised myself that I am going to make this man the happiest person in this woman. I gave you everything I had, my body, my love, my pride, my vanity, my knowledge, my skills. I would even go to the college's central database to see whether my grades weren't surpassing yours, and if it did, I used to suppress those, because I wanted to see my man become better than me. I gave you everything, and this is how you reply me. Her voice turned hoarse at her as she uttered her last sentence with drops of tears sneering out of Tina's eyelids, leaving me completely blank and speechless. After the breakup, I thought if I had moved out of Missouri, I would soon be able to move on. But the memories of someone was still stopping me from doing so. That someone is you. Tina wasn't normal. She was suffering some sort of mental disorder, but upon evaluating her symptoms, I was finding it difficult to deduce it, as this was the first time I seeing someone like this. The worst part was that she always had me on the tips of her fingers. Even during her times of innocence, she knew how to mentally manipulate me and keep me within her grip. I kept on pondering. It isn't personality dissociative disorder, as she can make distinction between herself and her alter ego Jane. This isn't histrionic personality disorder, as she now carries a murderous intent. This isn't intermittent explosive disorder. So I returned here with a new face, new body, new name, Jeanette, and with a clear new intent to kill off those who have disgraced me. I knew I needed help, so I shared my story at a forum in the deep web where people share their vengeful intentions. The community there took pity in me, saying that I deserved better in life and needed to get rid of those people who have poisoned my life. 2 large men volunteered to kidnap that bitch and bring her back here. Boy, was she scared yet so stubborn. I gave her several chances to be truthful towards me, as I knew her since childhood, and admit that she had snatched away my man, but each time I asked her, she just arrogantly denied and demanded to be freed. Then I grew sick of her obstinacy, so picked up the chainsaw, which I originally reserved for you, and witnessed her beautiful, sleek face literally wither away. I wanted you to get the message as quickly as possible, so I told one of those big hunks to cut one of her arms and throw it in the front yard of her home, and leave the rest of the body at an old abandoned place. Those men were professionals, so they knew exactly how to do it without getting noticed. That way we would play it safe with the dead body, and also this would enable us to gain the attention from our prime target, which we required the most to set up our trap. Tina gave out the foulest laughter I had ever heard. Then the knowledge I was desperately seeking finally showed up. Borderline personality disorder. Damn. This was going to be a hard one, even a rare case. If I wanted to save my skin from her, I needed to manipulate her somehow. Given her extreme level of sharpness, I could tell it for sure. It won't be easy, perhaps even impossible. Tina was reading out all the suggestions posted to her regarding the possible methods for my execution. These included throwing me off a cliff, cutting me off and feed my meat to the dogs, impaling me with large nails, crushing my skull and then pull off my brain and blend it to make brain juice. What the fuck, guys? Can't you come up with anything better than all these crap? Something to make him really feel my pain and make him pay for good? Tina complained. Then suddenly the doorbell rang and my heart leaped. This may sound utterly stupid, but I actually thought it was my sister who somehow got to trace me and came to my rescue. I heard Tina opening the main door and I heard a voice which sounded familiar. Then the door to the room I was held cracked open. But the person who came in, with Tina in fact, was the last person I had suspected of appearing. Steven? He glanced at Tina and asked, "So you finally caught the old bozo?" She dryly replied as she chuckled upon peering at me. "Yes." Her countenance looked cold and emotionless. "Wait, what the hell was going on here? Steven? Is he behind all these as well?" My head burned like crazy as I began to rewire all that was happening here, because condensing all the facts was the only way I could actually devise a way to get my ass out of here. Steven looked at me. He did not seem the least bothered at Tina's nakedness. "I know you got loads of questions, but let's just leave the details for now, okay?" To be honest, I did not know what question I had during that time because everything felt so blurry. I did not know how to make things out. He looked at Tina and calmly asked, "Did you get him anything? He looks awful. Fetch him a glass of lemonade, will you?" Tina disappeared from the room without saying a word. The first thing I was able to gather was, "What the heck, Steven? Tina, what the hell is happening here?" I know I sounded like an asshole back there, but I couldn't help it. "Shush, man. She can hear us. Be still. I will get you out." "Huh? It's Tina. She's gone completely nuts. Somehow she tracked all my drug dealings. She said if I don't help her out into catching you, she is going to inform the cops about me. She even threatened to kill off my entire family. You really don't know her, man. She's a quite popular bitch in the deep web, and has a lot of henchmen as well." Steven was attempting to untie me by taking off the tape first. "Fuck, this shit is completely jammed. How am I supposed to untie this?" "Rebecca, did you know that she was going to kill her?" "No. Actually, she informed me that right after killing her and instructed me to inform you of her death in the morning, that's all. She said she just wanted to see how you would react to Rebecca's death. I'm sorry she is playing with all of us. She took away my phone and even got her men spying on me. I wish I could help. He whelped a bit. Both of us knew well enough that this wasn't his fault. He was just another victim like me. I will get you out, and then you can call the cops or your sister before it's too late." Then suddenly the door cracked open, and before we could realize anything, Tina darted in towards us. "Steve, behind you!" He just managed to glance back before Tina jammed an axe right across his face. He fell with a loud thud in front of where I was tied up. "No, Steve." Steven's body was twitching as it struggled to live. Blood was gashing out of his face in fountains of red as the last bit of life coughed out of him, and his body finally settled, completely lifeless. Tina stared with sheer excitement at this ghastly sight, with her body shaking as her breathing grew. Her eyes were popping red while a sinistrous smile developed across her face. I couldn't bear the horror. The pain I felt during that moment. This bitch just killed one of my closest friends who only wanted to have us rescued, and she was enjoying every bit of her monstrous moments. I crudely felt my last chance of escaping from this hell was gradually slipping away. Then she sluggishly turned her head towards me like the way a zombie would do when they get to sense its prey isn't far away, and gave off a dry chuckle. "Do you want to have your lemonade now or later, darling? Better have it now before it turns bitter." I once watched a J-horror movie while sleeping over at Paul's place. Paul was my childhood friend, and both of us were devotees of the horror genre, and it felt like we were going to live the rest of our lives praising and thrilling upon the horror and gore the genre offered us. He said he recently started watching Asian horrors and had watched the original version of The Ring and The Grudge and found them to be way scarier than their American remakes. That night he suggested the movie titled Audition. I was zealous as I never got to taste the essence of horror movies outside the US. The movie depicted the psycho women inflicting revenge upon all her lovers by paralyzing them with a drug and then cutting off their feet, tongue, and ears. It wasn't the best of the horrors we had watched, but I must confess that the movie left us with a bitter feeling to our bile. The woman there was undoubtedly delusional and crazy. Tina, however, was at a totally new level into illustrating the true definition of being a psycho. Right then I realized what mistake I was making upon trying to interpret her lunacy. All the tension and pressure got all my logic and senses messed up. I would like to take back what I claimed before. She definitely wasn't a victim of BPD. She's a fucking psycho, one who doesn't follow any principle, one who refuses to be defeated, one who has lost everything that makes her human, a fucking psycho of pure evil. So tell me, do you want your lemonade now? I stared at her with a blank look, clearly feeling my blood washing away from my face. If I say yes, is she going to poison me with it? Or if I say no, is she going to get upset and get her chainsaw running? I imagined myself being in part of a game where you need to mentally manipulate the other in order to win, a game of mentality among psychology majoring people. Already 2 had fallen. Rebecca and Stephen. I was the only one standing, the only one against a psychopath capable of doing anything. It seemed like no matter what tricks I planned to pull, she already had an advantage with her vigilant slowing creeping towards my utter doom. If only I could reach my phone. Lord, please show me a way. Please. No matter how hard I tried, my glance always managed to set its way toward Stephen's pitiful corpse. His grotesque remain laid there motionless in the puddle of his own blood, his eyes gorging out, incapable of any sight. And I am going to be her next prey. Now here is a question for my readers. Before I proceed with my tale, what would you have done if you were all tied up by your psychotic ex-girlfriend who wouldn't feel the least bit of remorse into slashing you up with a chainsaw? Do let me know in the comments below. Do you want it or not? She scorned at me bitterly. I looked at Tina, feeling completely clueless regarding what I should answer. Fearing that the denial of her offer might end up being torn in parts, I replied faintly, "Yes, if you don't mind." Tina giggled. "Now that's a good boy. You just wait up, it's almost ready." The next moment she daintily darted away from the room. Why the hell does she even require so much time only to make a glass of lemonade? Is she planning to poison me with it? For some reason at that moment I started to suspect whether Tina was purposefully delaying my execution. Wait, does this mean she still got feelings for me? If she does, it means I still got a chance if I am able to manipulate her. Somehow. Tina appeared with a glass filled with lemonade. The lemonade appeared unnaturally yellow. "Here you go, handsome, have it. It's fresh." I remained silent. "Silly me, you can't even move. I should rather feed it to you." She held the glass to the tip of my lips. The glass of lemonade had a foul odor of ammonia, and I instantly knew of its true contents. But before I could even move my head, Tina held my head and thrust the glass against my lips, which made her so-called lemonade gush into my mouth. Although most of the liquid managed to spill out of my mouth, some still managed to sneak into my throat. I couldn't take it anymore. I coughed, my throat cringed, my head hurt. I take back what I thought before. Tina isn't planning to kill me straight away. She wants to play with me, make me her play doll, amuse herself while seeing me suffer, and then kill me. Damn, damn, damn. If only I could reach my phone. Fuck everything. After the glass emptied away, she nonchalantly threw it away, not. Eyeing at me, she smiled and said softly, "What's wrong, Johnny? You always used to enjoy licking me down there, so what's wrong now when I give you its drink? You sick fucking psychopath." She continued, "You know I am disappointed at you. You must have forgotten how I used to taste like after you went for that bitch." "So how does she taste like?" "Good." I gulped, not caring as the remaining droplets of her excrement went flowing into my throat. I whelped. "You disappoint me. You know I made that user ID of mine in that matchmaking forum in such a way that you would know that it's me." I blinked dumbly. Sassy_gone_hot191998. I used to be sassy, but I sexualized myself for your sake, and the 9th of January in 1998 is my birthday, and you even overlooked that. Drops of tears oozed out of her eyes as they flowed down her cheeks. I bet $1 million that no rational human being would have been able to guess that. I was the one who sent you all the emails requesting you to join that site in the deep web, and you, being a perverted asshole and a cheater, fell right into my trap, and now I got you right where I want you, and it perfectly shows that there is still justice in this world, don't you think so? My head whirled. My body felt numb from the tightness of the ropes. Beads of sweat continued to flow down my head, as I knew my time was ticking away mercilessly, unless I managed to come up with something. I peered once more at the lifeless body of Stephen sorrowfully, knowing that there was nothing I could do to mend what my ex-girlfriend had done. "I am sorry, Stephen. I am sorry, Rebecca. I am sorry, you guys. It's all my fault that you two got to end up like this." Tina looked away to her computer screen. The live stream event was still continuing, and it was quite apparent that the viewers were finding the entire thing of a psychotic girl abusing her ex-boyfriend amusing. Tina loudly read out one of the suggestions of executing me. "Suck out his blood, like the way he sucked out yours." "Aha, that's it. That's the one. Thank you so much for your suggestion. Let's see. Your name is Kruger XOXO. Thank you, dear. Hugs and kisses for you too. Love you all." She turned towards me. "That's a fantastic suggestion, don't you think so, sweetie?" She edged towards me and continued, "That way you are going to feel exactly like the way I felt when you ditched me, sucking away my blood, and you are going to die. Slowly and surely, cause the slower your death, the more painful it is going to be." Tina brought out a large syringe and presented it to me. "This is what I am going to use to end my misery and perhaps even yours." In a way, she was right, because right at that moment, I felt the most miserable than I had ever felt in my entire life. She pulled out the cap of the syringe and looked at the needle intently with darkness in her gaze. Then the next instant, she jammed the needle deeply straight into my right shoulder. "Ah!" I cried out. I wasn't anticipating such ruthless, but it was quite evident because Tina was determined to make my death as painful as possible, and she had finally gone into her works. I stared in horror as she pulled away the syringe as roughly as she had inserted it. The syringe was filled with crimson blood, my blood. I gasped for my breath as I felt nauseated once more. Tina closely observed the syringe while slowly rolling it in her palm. I couldn't tell what she was thinking, but the next instant made it obvious. She plucked open the needle head and pressed the plunger while holding the syringe. Droplets of the blood spilled out from the corners of her lips as she gulped. "This can't be happening. It tastes a bit funny. Got a strange smell, but a lot better than that thing." I cringed. She wasn't normal for sure, but as time passed, her insanity galloped up to a whole level, and I was the witness and her prey to all her madness. She fixed the needle head in once more and swiftly made her second blow, this time at the bottom corner of the left side of my neck. It felt as if I was going to die. The sting burned. I swallowed a mouthful of air, thinking that it might help, but it was of no use. The pain remained real. "Oh, poor Johnny, does it really hurt that much? You still don't know how painful it was for me when you ditched for that fucking hole." I pressed my eyes, trying to focus regarding what I can do to make Tina delay her next blow, because she seemed to be in a rhythm of displaying her sadism even further. I wasn't allowed my time, as the next thing she did was to my hair, and upon tilting my head backwards, she jammed her third blow right above my collarbone. I no longer could realize how that blow felt because my neck was now stinging like hell. You promised that we would get married once we had graduated, but it seems you are the one to break the promise. Tina cried out. It was true. I once mentioned to her that we would get married once we get to graduate, but it seemed like this promise was never going to be kept. Not if Tina wished to marry a corpse instead. And you also promised that we would have lots of children. Okay, she has turned fucking crazy because I don't remember making this promise. This was quite apparent that Tina was no longer able to differentiate between truths and lies, and perhaps I could use it to somehow buy my freedom. Can I manipulate her somehow? Ouch, my entire neck hurts. Just then my phone rang. I jolted. Tina seemed confused. I looked at her wall clock. It was past dinner time. Perhaps it was Mom or Regina checking up on me. This I initially thought. I tried to wiggle, but Tina, obviously being the one with her hands free, bent down to pull the phone out of my pocket. She looked at it and smiled. Oh, look who's calling. It's your hot sister. I bet she can't wait to fuck you. I remained silent. Then Tina did something for which I will always be thankful towards her for the rest of my life. She hung up on the call and turned the phone off. For all the things I mentioned to Tina in courtesy of her principle of transparency, one of the things I never got to disclose to her was the bug in my phone, the tracking bug. Yes! I squealed in silence. My ecstasy was short-lived as Tina threw away my phone, which gave off a cracking noise as it hit the floor, in the process, cracking away a portion of my heart as well. You bitch! That costed me $749.99. Finally, a ray of hope glinted its way as I could finally visualize that my raspy sister was on her way to save me. Unless she was busy at something and forgets all about me. Oh God, please don't let that happen. Tina made her fourth blow. I let out a loud shriek, no longer being able to bear the pain. By the time Regina makes it, I think, I would be lying dead by then. I don't remember it exactly, but I think she might have managed to plant a total of 20 or even 30 strikes on the top of my shoulder and neck. I don't know, I lost my count back there. All I remember is that all those assaults made my head almost motionless, with excruciating stings and shrieks all over. Then there was a loud bang from the main door. The police! Tina appeared confused as she dashed away from the room. She did not stay out long, as few seconds later, she sprinted into the room and locked the door. It's the cops. How the fuck do they know? Tina began to scurry across the room, feeling totally dazed over what was needed to be done next. There was a loud thud, and I knew for sure the cops had entered the house. Then Tina came up with a nasty plan. She went to her bed and picked up a large kitchen knife among all her equipment lying there. Then there was a loud knock at the door. It's the police. Open up. My heart skipped upon hearing that all so familiar voice. It was my sister. My sister hated waiting, so finding that there was no response from the other side, she kicked relentlessly to open up the door. Tina edged towards me and slowly placed the knife right over my neck as I continued to be baffled by her insane level of audacity. Even after all this, she still refuses to accept defeat. The door broke open and my sister skipped in with Jason watching her back. There was a moment of pause as my sister and her husband shockingly tried to make out the entire situation. There was I, completely tied up, next to my psychotic ex-girlfriend Tina, standing there completely naked with a knife over my neck, and finally there was the bloody corpse of my once college chap Stephen, lying next to our feet. That moment of pause was all Tina needed as she shrieked out, "Make one move and I am going to cut his head off." My sister just intently pointed the gun at her without even drawing the slightest of breaths. Jason gestured at me to remain calm, and I tensely obeyed him. I observed that Tina's hand was shaking as it appeared as if the knife would slip from her hand any moment. My sister hated waiting, and she proved it once more. There was a gunshot. The knife fell along with Tina. My sister cried out, "Jason, quick!" Jason sprinted to Tina and held her arms. She wasn't bleeding. I then realized that my sister might have intentionally missed the gunshot just to surprise Tina to drop the knife. My sister rushed towards me. I managed to blurt out, "Reg, I am." Before my sister scorned, "We'll talk at the station." Then she noticed the needle marks on my neck and screamed, "Jason, We need to take John to the hospital right now." Having finally freed from my hostage, I was escorted to the police car. By then, other police cars arrived along with representatives from the forensic department who dashed into the apartment, most likely to investigate the body of Stephen. On our way to the hospital, my sister did not speak a single word to me. For some strange reason, I felt awfully guilty during that time. I wanted to cover up the fact that Stephen was into drug dealing, but I wanted to come clean, so I let out all I had experienced. All the time during my interrogation, my sister just stared at me without any expression. This was the first time I was seeing my sister like this, which further loaded my baggage of guilt. At first, Tina was arrested, but then she got admitted to a mental asylum. I dared not to ask about her, as I feared that it would infuriate my sister even further. For a few days, my sister remained silent, not wishing to talk to anyone except for Jason. At the dinner table, she swiftly used to swallow up her food without uttering a single word. I was beginning to get worried. Shortly afterwards, an old couple paid us a visit. To our surprise, it was Tina's parents. To my dismay, the two begged for forgiveness on behalf of Tina. The two turned out to be neuroscientists. From them, we got to learn that for the last 1 year, they had no contact with Tina. They claimed that she was once a natural genius excelling in her studies, but along with that, she had always been delusional and was on psychotic drugs. Then, right at the time she turned 18, she moved out, and from then on, they never had any form of contact with her. They believed that Tina might have stopped taking her medicines, which ultimately resulted in her present condition. My sister's silent treatment towards me continued for some time, then it wore off. A few days ago, my sister barged into my room and handed me a new cell phone. "It's bugged like the last one," she said softly. "I am glad it is," I murmured to myself. "Hey, Squirt, there is something I have been wanting to you, but I really don't know how to even start." "What is it?" I asked, feeling bewildered. You see, Tina's parents. You know they are neuroscientists, but the thing is they once developed a drug for which they needed an approval in order to test it. But unfortunately, that request was turned down, but never got to stop at that point. They started to do neuro experiments on Tina back when she was small, and on other small children without any license. Initially, the symptoms were harmless, but they noticed that she was beginning to turn delusional, so they stopped their experiments. But we all know that the effect of that experiment never got to end, even to this day. I remained silent, not knowing what to utter. "Just to let you know, we just got them arrested." I drink not because I like alcohol, but because I've recently seen the horrifying underbelly of the world, and I can't go back to blissful ignorance in any other way than through the bottom of a bottle. I can't sleep either, so I'm writing this out to hopefully get some of the poison out of my head. It began with a picture. I'm nobody special, don't get me wrong, just the opposite. Not a detective, not a cop, nothing like that. I was just a senior in college with an office job lined up, and I only had to coast out until the end of the year. All that free time made me vulnerable to questions. The question, and the picture that came with it, would have just flowed past my mind like every other bit of internet flotsam, if not for that peculiar state of aggravated bored I found myself in that freezing February afternoon. 2 local girls had recently gone missing, that much I knew. My year-older friend worked as an intern at the city news channel, and he told me nobody could make heads or tails of what had happened. "Look," he wrote in an email, "someone at another news group sent us this. The cops found 2 pictures uploaded from their phones after the last time anyone saw them. They're hoping somebody can identify this guy." I remember rolling my eyes. That was not the first time he'd forwarded me email chains full of internet meme bullshit. He was a sucker for clickbait. The pictures were the typical scary type, taken in darkness and limited in scope such that nothing could really be discerned beyond, "Look at how weird this is." The first image was taken from directly behind the head of a man with short brown hair, close enough that the flash illuminated his intermittent scalp in bright white. He appeared to be somewhere dark and slightly foggy. Over his shoulder, a brandished knife could be seen, held forward for some unknown reason. The second image was of a man lying face down in a hotel bed surrounded by empty liquor bottles and scattered pills. From his disheveled and sweat-matted short brown hair and the shape of the back of his head, it looked to be the same man. Convenient that his face was hidden in both shots, I remember thinking. Behind him was a peeling hotel wall and a mirror that somebody appeared to have spit on. In the mirror, it was possible to see the man's left arm held out in such a manner that he was taking the picture himself with a cell phone. Given the context, I guessed the phone belonged to one of the two missing girls. I tended not to believe things like this because they never turned out to be anything. The two girls had likely snuck off to spring break, and this was some sort of prank. Absolute worst-case scenario, this was just some drunk frat guy they'd hung out with. Let me guess, I wrote back to my friend. An expert thinks this guy was dead when he took the picture of himself. Ooh, spooky, right? He's definitely recently dead based on the way his limbs are behaving in that picture, and the discoloration and slight bloating of the skin. But that's not it. It's totally possible to put your camera on a timer to take a picture later. So they thought this was a suicide until they noticed something. Look closer. By his right hand. I enlarged the image on my monitor and realized that there was actually something in his hand. But it couldn't be. I printed out the photo to get a better look, and it was what I'd suspected. The exact same photo we were looking at was in the dead man's hand. An aging clock on the wall had the same hand positions in both images. He had in his hand a picture of himself dead, apparently the same photo he would later take of himself by using the camera's timer. I emailed back, "What are we looking at here?" "Nobody knows, man, but they crowdsourced finding the wallpaper and they figured out which hotel it was taken at." Crowdsourced? Yeah, new technique. They make some clues public and let thousands of people see it online. Eventually someone recognizes the clue and then they've got a lead. It's a hotel in Brazil. February was almost over and spring break was nigh. Holy shit, I had an opportunity to do something weird and crazy and prove to my friend that clickbait was stupid. Dude, I'm gonna go there. Where? That hotel? You're not serious. Why not? I've got my passport because my mom pestered me to do it last year, and I've got the money to fly down there because of my summer internship. If there's nothing to see, I'll just hang out on the beach and have a normal spring break. I can give you the specific hotel, but are you sure you want to do that? That's like crazy. The peculiar mix of aggravated boredom and intrigued indignation brewing in me compelled me to say yes. I'd seen so many ridiculous internet myths in my time online. It seemed an incredible opportunity to debunk one. I'd never really left the country before, of course, but I fought down the nervousness and did my best to research everything I could. The hotel was near a popular tourist destination, so it wasn't like I was going somewhere horrible. The beaches were beautiful, if nothing else. The trip by plane was disarmingly familiar. Civilization, air conditioning, and safety shrouded me all through the flight, landing, and disembarkation. I waited for my bag while a bunch of people stood around checking their cell phones, just like home. And it didn't hit me that I'd flown to a foreign country and continent until I barged through that last glass door and smacked right into a brutal wall of humid heat. Christ, it was straight winter back home, and here it was legitimately late summer. I'd chosen my initial clothes poorly, and they immediately became sweat-soaked drapes in a taxi that had no air conditioning. As high as the prices were in the hotel gift shop, and as mass-produced and bland as they were, I bought lighter shirts and shorts and then sought refuge in my room. I sat by the wall air conditioning unit until I'd recovered, and then I looked around my room. My friend had given me the right info. The wallpaper was the same pattern from the photo, and the bed, mirror, and clock were all the right design. Did a guy really commit suicide by pill in this hotel under mysterious circumstances? The nearness of it sent a biting, air-conditioned shiver down my spine. Scary images sent in email chains online were supposed to be stupid myths, not something from a specific real location. Once acclimated, I fought the churning fear in my stomach and forced myself to walk down to the lobby. I had pictures of the two girls on my phone, and I was debating whether to ask the concierge about them. But I didn't have to. Their photos were already on a bulletin board by the front desk, among others. The concierge that I'd been considering approaching instead approached me when he saw me studying the pictures. "Voce reconoce alguém?" I remember laughing nervously. What? Oh, tourist? Yes. Well, I figured I might as well try, or else my friend would mercilessly tease me about flying all the way down there for nothing. I touched the pinned papers. These two. Ah. The older Brazilian man sighed. Very stupid, very bad. They went on a hike and never returned. He waved his hands for a moment before seeming to settle with a sigh on a less accurate word. Jungle. It eats people here. That was something more than the gossip back home about the incident. A hike? Yes, many trails have beautiful sights. Calm and peaceful belies the danger beneath. Do not go swimming, the currents are swift. Do not climb, the rocks are loose and the trees untrustworthy. Do not stay after dark for the, He paused again and appeared to frown at having to use the same word. The jungle? It eats people, I finished for him. Is it safe to go alone during the day if I stick to the marked paths? He glared, but drew lines for me on a local map to show me where the girls had said they were hiking. I don't want to put your picture up here too, he said. But a policia did not go looking, just gave us these papers. We do not risk our own to find foolish tourists. It's possible those two are still alive if the jungle did not find them at night. Hurt, maybe. It's sad. I gulped, but put on a brave face. What was I doing, and why? I clutched the local map and adjusted my backpack as the concierge went back to his duties. I should have just gone home. I remember thinking I wanted to go home, or hell, even just to the beach. But presented with a stark cold fact like that, the police didn't even look. It felt impossible to go sit at the beach and ogle women while two fellow American girls were possibly dying at the very same time. There were some guides for hire outside the hotel, but I felt less safe with a stranger than by myself. I couldn't stop thinking about tales of guides tricking people into captivity and selling their organs on the black market. All I had to do was walk a few paths, right? It was stupid. I knew it was stupid. The guides saw my direction, listened to my insistence on going alone, and looked at me as if I was a dead man. When he saw I was serious, one pressed a survival knife into my hand and shook his head when I tried to pay him. I accepted the gift and put it in my backpack before heading down the long dirt road toward the tourist hiking paths. This wasn't like the small trails around hotels and campgrounds back home. The jungle here was not a mastered entity, and life was swarming everywhere. Thick clouds of insects hovered together only to be scooped up by flocks of little birds, or perhaps they were bats. I wasn't sure. It was humid as hell and stuffy under the thick canopy of gloom and green. But I'd somehow stumbled my way into a mission and I couldn't turn back without hating myself. A creek about a foot wide presented itself a few steps off the path, and I nearly went over to it to splash and cool myself down before I remembered the concierge's warnings. I took a long stick and lowered it in only to have the branch jerked out of my hands. The creek was a foot wide but impossibly deep, and the current under those placidly flowing bubbles was murderous. If the girls had fallen in here? No. Their phones had uploaded photos after they'd disappeared. Whatever had happened, it had not involved instant death. Where would they have gone? For hours, I followed the path they'd indicated to the concierge until I reached a fork in the narrow, overgrown trails. One path followed the black line he'd drawn, and the other led to what looked like a gorgeous waterfall basin. Never in my life had I experienced such a strong fatal instinct. They'd gone the less traveled path in the hopes of taking gorgeous pictures for their online profiles. Thus possibly it was death by Facebook. Another 20 minutes of exhausting hike later, I found that the wide round basin was accessible down a steep scree and then along a slope of crumbling root-sprouting dirt. I ever so carefully picked my way down and then nearly stumbled over a shoe. It was a dirty black American sneaker, and I picked it up to examine it. Jumping back and letting out a short scream of shock, I threw it down on the ground. It had a foot in it, a goddamn foot. Holding back overwhelming revulsion, I peeled back the tongue of the sneaker to confirm it was a female foot. Oh God, I can still remember how it smelled. I can still remember the swarming flies and budding maggots in that stump of red flesh. Yep, they were dead. Christ. I leaned back against the root-sprouting dirt wall behind me and tried not to throw up. I'd come all the way out here to find a rotting foot. This was why the police hadn't looked, why they never looked. They were right in assuming anyone that didn't come back from this horrible tangle was just plain dead. I checked my cell phone. No signal, of course. I couldn't see the sun through the maze of greenery above, but my phone said it was getting late on the schedule I'd set for myself. Dusk would be coming, and it was time to head back. Even though I'd ignored the warning about climbing, I intended to heed the one about avoiding nighttime. Every single bush and hillock out here hid something alive, and I didn't want to see what might emerge in the dark. And then I heard her. Help! It was the faintest echo through the dense foliage, but I was dead certain it had been a hopeless female shout. I shouted back a half dozen times, even screaming till my throat was raw, but she didn't seem to hear me in return. Or maybe she was incapable of shouting again. It hit me. One rotting foot didn't mean they were both dead. They could both have been alive for all I knew, and the foot was the result of some injury or animal attack that had left them stranded and hurt out here. Shit. If only I'd gone home 30 seconds earlier, I would never have kept looking. The waterfall above was beautiful but austere. There was no climbing up that way, which meant the girls had likely followed the resulting narrow river if they were unable to climb back up the scree I'd just come down. Judging my footholds and handholds, I clambered along clean rock, thankful to be out of the tangle for a time. The progress wasn't hard, just precarious, and I guessed that someone could do it minus a foot if needed. Eventually the terrain became more like a canyon with a river at the bottom, and I was forced to lift up onto dirt again. Here I found an animal trail splitting off in 3 directions. A cell phone with a cracked screen lay half buried. I brushed it off to discover that it still had some battery power and that it was not password protected. The text messages were mostly mundane conversations from the owner to her friends. The most recent ones were variations on help. And are you getting this? Based on frustration from the lack of signal out here. There was no information there about what had happened. But then I checked the pictures on her camera. Beyond all the typical selfies and photos of the airport, the flight, and the hotel, there were a few of the jungle I'd just traversed, the waterfall basin, and then the very path I was standing on. The next picture seemed to be taken from hiding. Between the leaves, the image showed a man brandishing a knife and peering into the underbrush opposite. I still couldn't see his face, but he was dressed in local wear I recognized from the shop. Had he seen the girls at the hotel and followed them out here? From the back of his head, it was the same man from the suicide picture. This was serious. I needed to be ready for a fight or to run. Suddenly tense, I put my backpack down, hid it under a few bushes, and withdrew the survival knife the guide had given me. With the knife out and at the ready in one hand and the cell phone in the other, I swiped slowly through the photos. The next few were of the trail I was on, and I followed it step by step, retracing the path the girls had gone. The man was not in these pictures. They seemed to be photos of landmarks that might help them find their way back. Many were blurry and had been taken in haste. No doubt they'd been running. I couldn't shout anymore either, not without potentially revealing my presence to that man. Had he cut off one of the girl's feet or something? How had her foot ended up back by that waterfall? Swipe. There's the rock. Swipe. Okay, there's the bend in the path. Swipe. There's the arranged stones to mark a direction when no other landmark would suffice. A few more swipes and I was back where I'd started. The animal trails split off in 3 directions, and I could hear the river out beyond the trees. So they'd come full circle by accident, realized they were lost. Then what? Drop their phone here in frustration? Or had they run into the man with the knife again and gotten caught? If there were 3 paths out of here and 2 looped to one another, that meant the middle one had to go elsewhere, right? I heard a noise behind me, whirled, saw nobody and nothing. I stared out into the jungle as dusk swept a dim shroud between the trees. I'd stayed too long and night was almost upon me. I had to go home. What was I going to do? Fight a knife-wielding madman in the dark? I could get the cops and bring down the cavalry on this shit. And then I heard her. Help! It came from down the middle path. God damn it. As it became harder and harder to see, I crept down that middle path, my knife held forward. If there was someone out here, I would only have a split second to strike back or run. The only advantage I had was that they had no idea I was here. And it was as hard for them to see me as it was for me to see them, as long as I only checked the phone intermittently to keep its light to a minimum. Swipe. A picture of the middle path in gloom. All right, on a night sometime earlier this week, they'd gone this way. Had they again looped back somehow to drop this phone? I swiped ahead a few times to see multiple shots of the path I was on. I stopped at a shot of the knife-wielding man from the side. All that could be seen was a silhouette in deep forest dusk. Looking at the shot disturbed me. Was I witnessing the events leading up to someone's murder? I swiped back to the path shots and continued following their trail. When I reached the spot where the man's picture had been taken from the side, I heard something crunching out in the darkness. I froze for what felt like an eternity as dusk began to approach night. All my senses told me that something was out there. Something was waiting and watching with malicious intent, perhaps even with glee. I could feel it. As absolute darkness fell, a change came over the humid and dense air. The birds went quiet, and my ears stopped hearing their shrieking calls with a sudden internal echo. I thought I'd gone deaf for a moment, but I could still hear my own breathing. Moving step by quiet step back down the path and behind a boulder, I got out the phone to light my way and to check further pictures. Help! I turned my head suddenly to try to get a bead on the scream in the absolute silence. It sounded closer somehow. Help! This time it came from the opposite direction, a little further away. Help! That one came from right on the path ahead, exactly where I'd been about to walk before the sensation of being watched had stopped me in my tracks. It was the same scream every single time, the same intonations, the same length, the same emotion. I swallowed down panic. That girl had died days ago, and someone or something was using her last scream to toy with me. It was insane to think so, but it was the only conclusion. Swiping all the way ahead in the pictures on her phone, I found a photo of an arm over a face. A man was wincing against the flash of the camera. Had they used the flash as a weapon to blind him? I held my arm up as a series of flashes erupted right in front of my face. I couldn't choose a direction. I ran. Somehow someone or something had snuck right up in front of me and somehow it was impossible, but pushing down the trail I ran in absolute terror until the same scream erupted a few feet ahead of me. Help! It was loud this time, painfully loud, and I sliced at empty darkness. The light from the phone showed nothing ahead, just unmoving leaves and fronds. I held the knife forward, with no idea what I could even do with it, until a series of flashes went off right behind my head. Was it behind me? I ran for my life. Down the dirt, climb along the river canyon in the dark, leap up the scree, sprain my ankle. That's what I remember. Limp along the path I'd come down earlier that day. I'd lost my backpack and the map inside it. I thought I could remember, but the jungle transforms at night. All of the landmarks I looked for were impossible to find in darkness, and I knew something was out there hunting me. Obviously, because I'm writing this now, as I said, to get the poison out of my head, I made it out of there, but not for nearly a day. I spent that night crammed into a small rock hollow with stones piled up to block the entrance and only enough space for my knife to stab out. All night long, help, help, help. From right outside my hollow, help, help. Laughter and random bits of conversation mimicking what the two girls had said to each other before danger had found them. It had stalked and watched them for hours before night had fallen. A foot. That was all that was left. A foot severed by powerful jaws. When dawn finally rolled around, my sleepless body practically dragged itself out of its own accord. I don't fully remember what happened when I returned to the hotel, but they took care of me and I did not tell them I found her cell phone. And you know what? It's been 5 days, and I'm supposed to fly back to the States tomorrow night. But I happen to know I'll never make it. I sit in my hotel room and stew in my own nightmare. I can hear it calling from the deep of the night. It's out there mocking me still, waiting because it knows I can't escape. All of those pictures were taken before they ever happened. All part of the horror in the jungle where time knows nothing of the strict structure of civilization. I only came out here because of that last picture, the only one that hasn't come true yet. How messed up is that? So I sit here clutching the photo I printed out of that last picture, and I drink, and I take pills to try to knock myself out before it comes for me. I'm not killing myself. I just don't want to be awake when it happens. It's creeping closer now. The cruelest part of this is the clock on the wall. I know the exact moment as it ticks closer and closer second by second. Another swig, a few more pills. It's slithering up round the bottom of the clock now, the bottom of the basin, the bottom of my heart, numbing. He said it. I didn't listen. Jungle wasn't the right word, but he straight up said it. He told me directly, it eats people here.